Happy Friday, folks. Hope everything is going well. Hope you're having a very, very good day. Let's jump right in. It's been a long time since we had a video quite like the very famous Pirate King video where we had a single submission that took up the entire episode. But this is one of those episodes. Is it Friday? It is Feels Friday, where I get a little bit more loose with what I talk about on the channel. This one is a hobby nightmare, though. There's lots of hobby in it. I've double-checked that. So, let's have a little look in, shall we, at our submission by Tyler. And, let's have a little go here. Look at these cool things I found. How awesome. Awesome. Anyway, Tyler says, "Hi North, my name is Tyler. I'm not the greatest writer, but I will give it my best shot. I promise I will use the grammar editing function, but there is some amount of bad English that you just can't fix." Well, you'd be surprised, mate. You'd be surprised how much the grammar correction can fix things. I hope that you will stick with it to the end. I'm sorry if it's a longer one. I do want to let you know I have been subscribed to and listening to your channel for about a year. Keep up the great work. Thank you very much. Before I begin, I do want to add a side note. I've never understood why you need permission to drink tea from those writing to you about their hobby nightmares. Maybe I'm missing something. Feel free to stop and drink tea at any time. No, it was a quirk of the channel. So back in the day, I said that I enjoy it when people say, "Here, you take a sip of tea here," because it basically reminds me to drink my tea. Because my tea always goes cold, because I'm sitting here talking and things. So reminding me to drink the tea is reminding me to drink it while it's hot, right? That's the way to do it. And it just sort of took off and became a thing. So it's not a huge thing, just, you know, it's what people do. I also think it's kind of a psyop that people are training me to drink tea on command, which is, you know, maybe they are. It's working, if it is. A few months ago, I thought I finally had my first hobby nightmare, quote unquote. However, in hindsight, my entire time in the hobby has been one big cringy nightmare. I want to take you back in time and talk about the moments that led me to wargaming, and how it has not been what I had hoped or expected. Okay, alright. This is going to be an interesting one. A very interesting one. To begin, it was the year 2001, and I was a 13-year-old kid. At that time, I had never been into a nerdy hobby before. Rather, my hobbies consisted of sports and video games. However, that all changed in the spring of 2021 when my cousin came to stay with us for a week and brought his Magic the Gathering cards. We ended up playing a lot of Magic, and I had a wonderful time. After my cousin left, I decided I wanted to keep some cards of my own, so I walked about 6 blocks to the local hobby store. I was quite hesitant because this is where all of the weird people hung out. I didn't want anyone to see me. This is where I think it is important to tell you that I grew up in a small remote town in the United States. That was 273 kilometers, for my English brethren, away from the nearest metropolitan area. We were not a big enough town to have the kind of stores you would need for niche hobbies. But we did have a store that sold Magic the Gathering cards. The only reason this store could exist is due to the owner being a wounded Vietnam veteran who was able to fund the small store through whatever disability checks he received. He did not make much money, but it was his hobby, so he was able to fund his dream. I only know this because I found myself back then at the store again, years later, where I was able to speak to him in an adult conversation. Okay, alright, well that's good. You're able to go back and have a little chat to him, that's nice. Also of interest is something that may be hard to believe. I didn't even know what Warhammer was until I was in my late 20s or early 30s. I had heard of Warhammer, but I thought it was a cheap book and video game intellectual property that was copying Warcraft and Starcraft. Okay, alright. I had no idea it was the other way around. I say this because I want to show you how non-existent hobbies like wargaming were in the area where I lived. Well, that's an important distinction, mate. Yes, those properties did take a lot of inspiration from Warhammer, but Warhammer literally lifted and stole a load of concepts and themes from other properties in sci-fi. So, yeah, they are quite original, but also not. So don't worry too much on that front. Anyway, back to my story. In my 3rd or 4th time purchasing the Magic the Gathering cards at the store, I ran into something that piqued my interest. I saw 2 men playing a grid-based miniature game with beautifully painted miniatures, and I wanted to play too. I identified blister packs for the game on the wall of the store. Instead of buying magic cards as I intended, I selected a few of the coolest looking miniatures and told the store owner that I would like to purchase them. The store owner gave me a puzzled look and said, do you know how to play this? And I lied and said, oh yes, of course, it's one of my favourite games. He gave me a skeptical look and said, and you realise we require them to be painted to play, right? And I said something along the lines of, oh yeah, I understand, I know how to paint. So, I took my new metal miniatures home. I was going to learn the rules online and was going to expertly paint the miniatures. I mean, painting could be nothing but easy, let's be honest. I proceeded to do what any normal kid my age would do. I grabbed the watercolour paint meant for painting children's Disney painting books and pulled out the amazing square paintbrush that came with it. Oh my god, this is not going to go well. This is not going to go well. After trying to apply the paint, I quickly realised this wasn't going to work. I showed my mum and asked her why the paint wouldn't stick. My mum told me that I needed acrylic paints, so we went to the store to get acrylics. I didn't have much money left, so I decided I only needed 3 colours: yellow, blue and red. Any good artist can work from the 3 primary colours, right? And of importance, I was getting a passing grade in 7th grade art, so of course, I've got confidence. I quickly learned that mixing cheap acrylic primary paint colours to make different colours was too difficult a task for a guy my age. The easy route is, I started with my first humanoid bird warrior and painted his skin yellow. It was the closest thing I had to a skin tone, so yellow would do. The paint still wasn't sticking, however, and the application was uneven, overly thick, and downright awful. No, I didn't know what a primer was, how would I? I distinctly remember painting the mouth red, and the red covering about half of the face. Brush control was impossible with the brush that I had, and I gave up after the first miniature. So I had a half-finished, jaundiced Wish.com version of Dolly Parton Man-Bird Warrior, and in no way was I ever going to allow anyone to lay eyes on the monstrosity I had created, not even my mum. I did what made sense at the time, and I took the miniature and hid it in the garage. And that, sir, was the end of my childhood experience with miniature gaming. Oh, Jesus. I found myself going right back to Magic the Gathering after I got my next round of money from mowing lawns. I walked back to the hobby store to buy Magic the Gathering, and when I entered the store, the owner smiled at me and said, "Oh hey, did you ever finish painting those miniatures?" And I quickly came up with the first lie that came to my head and said, no, I haven't been able to. I came down with the West Nile virus and it left me weak and unable to paint. Just like before, he gave me quite a skeptical look. He replied, "Oh, sorry to hear that. I hope you get your strength back." I don't know why I said I had West Nile. I suppose it was the headlines on the news, so that's why it came to my mind. The West Nile virus in the United States was quite rare. To add to the cringe, some of my weird classmates were in the store at the time, and they heard me say it. It was around 2 days later, I came home from school and was met by my father, who said I had something I needed to explain to him. "What do you mean?" I asked. He said, "I want you to explain to me why Miss Mollett brought over a pan of baked goods for you." I replied, I don't know. My dad stated, "Well, I do. She came to the door and told me she felt awful because she heard through the grapevine that you were extremely weak and recovering from the West Nile virus." This is great. My dad forced me to call her, despite protest, and explained to her that I lied about having the West Nile virus. Again, this is so cringy, but you know what? It had a hand in teaching me not to lie. In terms of lying, I don't know why I lied so much as a child. I always got caught and always ended up in shame and embarrassment. Since the West Nile lie came from the hobby store, it was clear that I could never go back there due to my embarrassment. I had to quit Magic the Gathering, and thus spent the rest of my school years playing video games as my only hobby. After school, I joined the United States Marine Corps. It is intriguing to hear how many of your Hobby Nightmare submitters have joined the military, and I've appreciated your take on the reasoning. I will give you my take in a moment. I will say, they would not believe how many rough, muscular, manly men in my unit were secretly doing nerdy things behind closed doors. A couple of weeks after I got to my first unit, I was approached by my hard-ass sergeant, who came to me when I was isolated and said, "So, do you, play World of Warcraft?" I thought he was testing me, but I told the truth and said, yes. He replied with, cool. So, would you be willing to play the game with me? I have a guild. I said that I would, of course. My sergeant replied, look, here's the thing. I have a private room. No one knows I play World of Warcraft. I want to keep it that way, you understand? I nodded. You can bring your laptop in my room, but if you play in yours, your roommate can't know you're playing with me. You understand? So, we played together as secret World of Warcraft friends. That's brilliant. That's so brilliant. I love that. That's awesome. Over time, a few more Marines found their way into our guild. It later became one of the worst kept secrets in the unit. The other Marines knew I would rather play computer games than go to strip clubs or get trash drunk on the weekend. I think it made other closet nerd Marines comfortable telling me about them being closest closet nerds. Okay. Over time, I estimated that around 25% of my unit was playing World of Warcraft at any one time. So here's my quick take. Some people who join the military, especially the Marine Corps, are just a bunch of nerds who want to roleplay being a Marine by being a Marine. Yeah. I tend to go on the... I don't know, because I've never been in the Marines, but... I tend to go on the thought of... you'd be surprised at the mental strength it takes to be a nerd. Okay? Let me take a sip of tea here. Yeah, you'd be surprised the mental strength it takes to actually be a nerd. You know, to be nerdy. To be somebody... Because you're told all the time, don't be a nerd. Right? Don't do nerdy things. You're told that absolutely all the time. You know? So to have the mental strength to say, no, fuck that. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to be my own person. I'm going to play my own games. And you can't stop me. So I'm going to do what I want to do. It's a very similar mental strength that is needed to say, I'm going in the military. I don't give a shit what you say. I know it's going to be good for me. And I know it's going to turn my life around. So that's what I'm going to do. Do you know what I mean? It's a very, very, very similar mindsets. That's why I think nerds are quite weirdly well restricted to going into the military. Just, you know. Anyway, later in the Marine Corps, I got back into Magic the Gathering through another Marine. It all happened when this mofo pulled out magic cards in the middle of a 24-day field op and said, anyone want to learn how to play Magic the Gathering? I was the first taker. We would play Magic on cardboard boxes in the back of a 7-ton vehicle while we sat around and waited for fire missions. Yeah, it's the old military hurry up and wait, right? Initially, everybody made fun of us and said things like, fucking nerds. But by the end of our time in the field, there was lots of arguing and a long waiting line of being next to play the winner. Those were great times and helped me get through my sheer boredom in the field. The Magic cards we used got wrecked, but it was worth it. Playing also sparked my interest back into Magic, a hobby that stuck with me after the military. That's good. Excellent, man. When I returned home, I went back to that old childhood hobby store and played Magic daily. I don't think the store owner remembered me as a 13-year-old. Magic was a fun game, but it never really fully connected with me. We were supposed to be wizards casting spells and summoning monsters to kill the other wizard, but once I started playing competitively, it no longer felt thematic. I loved the artwork and the fighting, but I wanted my cards to come alive. I wanted my creatures to feel and kill other creatures and to die brave and heroic deaths. I just wanted to massacre things. The game was more of a puzzle. I'll never forget the first time somebody decked me, meaning I lost because my deck was empty and I had no cards to draw from. I thought, you know what, this is lame. We're supposed to be killing each other and I've lost because I have no cards. We should be fighting to the death. I was also the guy in the Magic Store League who would play cards with cool artwork or pick booster packs from my favourite sets despite losing a competitive edge. For some reason, that would ruffle people's feathers. They would say things like, dude, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. But it's better to lose looking cool than to win looking ugly. It is a great philosophy, I know. Magic was a... Well, here's the thing, man. Here's the thing. Before I continue, the reason why you're okay doing that is because you don't value your life through your hobbies. What I mean is that a lot of nerds, a lot of guys who've not been in the military, who've not done anything in life, take these hobbies on, and if they don't win, then they're losing a sense of themselves. You know what I mean? They feel like a failure in life. But when you've been through the shit you've been through actual hardship, it really does make you a more zen person. And you're okay just losing because you don't put your self-worth behind the cards that you're putting down on the table. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, Magic was a big part of my life, but it never really fully satisfied my hobby needs. Just when I thought I had fully quit and sold all my cards, it would somehow drag me back. I came back 4 separate times. My return to Magic the Gathering finally stopped in 2016 when I was first introduced to real board games. I don't want to get too much into my board gaming life, but let me just say that I was invited to a private 4-day overnight board game convention that opened a whole new world for me. I had no idea how robust board games were. I had no idea there were endless themes, endless styles, and various mechanics. Before the convention, board games in my mind consisted of utter garbage like Monopoly, Risk, and Clue. Now, they could be anything. I was also introduced to the Kickstarter website by one of my convention patrons, and that sent me down a deep rabbit hole. After I got home, I went online and bought about $1,000 of new board games. Then I proceeded to log into Kickstarter and back every live project that I liked the look of. For the next 4 years, I backed just about every cool project that popped up. I didn't just back any project. I constantly went all in. I needed the metal coins, the card sleeves, the inserts, the acrylic tokens, the expansions, etc. If they had it, I needed it. I had the fear of missing out on bugs, and I had it badly. How many of these games did I end up playing? Hardly any. It was due mainly to the lack of time than the lack of people to play with. Surprisingly, if I asked somebody if they wanted to play a board game, they would always say yes. The problem was that I was backing a lot of cooperative campaign-driven board games that advertised 100 hours worth of play to complete their respective campaigns. Awesome in theory, awful in practice. I had boxes and boxes of games stacked in my basement, and I'd come to realise I would probably never come close to playing even half of them. What a monetary waste. Thousands upon thousands of dollars spent, time that I would never have to play, and the cluttering of space created such an emotional burden on my soul. There is a saying that all inanimate objects talk to you. I can't disagree with that statement. My board games would say, "Why haven't you opened me? Why haven't you played me? How long do I have to sit on the shelf before I get attention?" Only later did I realise the amount of stress that I caused myself by buying too many board games. Only later did I realise that the dreams I had about all the fun campaigns I would play in my future would be only that. Dreams. Aww. Well, there's a bit more to go here. Despite all my board games, I wanted something more. I needed something that gave the epic feel of a miniature dungeon crawl campaign, but without the time commitment. Something that I could play with only one other person, where I didn't need to worry about how many people to plan for. There's nothing worse than inviting 7 people and 3 show up, or vice versa. I need something that told a story as I played. Something that had a passion for the theme, and of course, I needed to be able to roll dice and kill things, including wargaming. I've heard it said that board games are just a gateway drug to war games. Maybe that is true. It is definitely true. It is definitely true. I know a lot of people who started in one and ended up in the other. Definitely. Absolutely. Absolutely. At this point, I already had a war game that sat on my shelf and I'd never played. Back in my Kickstarter days, I backed a miniature war game called A Song of Ice and Fire. For those who do not know, this is a rank and flank game based on George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones book series. A Song of Ice and Fire is my all-time favourite book series, and I'll buy anything set in the universe. I purchased the game because it was Song of Ice and Fire, not because I was looking for a war game. Despite my initial misunderstanding of wargaming, I would still purchase every unit and faction that came out for the game, and as of 2024, I have shelves upon shelves of this game in particular. For a new hobbyist, the game is very friendly. The miniatures in the game come pre-assembled, and there are different colour plastics based on their respective factions. Even so, I didn't want to play the game because the miniatures were not painted. I had joined the Facebook group and Reddit page, and it was full of beautifully painted miniatures. I knew for a fact that I could not paint, as evidenced by the Dolly Parton Birdman warrior earlier, so I kept collecting units and leaving them on the shelf. It is now 2020, and I have yet to play a war game. I do, however, have one friend who I'm very close with who loves any game I bring out. My friend and I are slowly going through my different Kickstarter-backed miniature campaign games in the middle of COVID. But we are barely making a dent. One day, my friend told me he was moving to Hungary. And that was that. He was gone. And I had no one left to enjoy my campaign games with. I picked up a video game controller for a few months and played in isolation, but the longer I went without board games, the more I missed playing. I had a son and a younger daughter at the time, but my son was about 9 at the time and not mature enough to play board games with. In the summer of 2020, I decided that I was going to try my hand at painting. I watched a ton of painting videos on YouTube, bought some paints and a brush, and started working on the miniatures from my Kickstarter campaign games. Long story short, I became better and better at painting and was quite good at it. I was shocked at how well I could paint. It made me proud that I was able to come back to something that I inherently believed I could never be good at. After a year of painting, I decided I was going to start tackling my Song of Ice and Fire miniatures. I used every spare moment that I had over the next 2.5 years to paint Song of Ice and Fire miniatures, and at the time of writing, I have over 800 models painted with about 800 to go. It is daunting to think about, but I have never suffered from painting burnout. While I've had a lot of satisfaction in painting, I also have experienced an unhealthy aspect of addiction. Yeah, no shit, man. From what you've told me, you definitely get addicted to things. No shit. At this point, I've discussed some smaller hobby nightmares in my life, but this is where I would like to get into the meat of my few, but personally devastating, wargaming hobby nightmares. That's how you do a preamble, guys. That is a action-packed filled 22-minute preamble for a hobby nightmare. Love it. To begin, I love medieval fantasy. I love it. But my son does not. He tells me that swords are too personal, and he would rather be into things that shoot. At this time, he is 12, and he was very interested in my painting and my hobby, but was not interested in the theme of the games I owned. My son told me that he didn't want to play a Song of Ice and Fire with me. I asked him, what if it was Star Wars? He said, yeah, I'll play if it's a Star Wars game. So, I went and bought a core box and a few extra units of Star Wars Legion models. He had loved the Airspeeder and the Fleet Troopers, so I let him paint them up. When he was done with his models, he let me touch them up to a nice tabletop standard. My son didn't want to paint anymore, but in terms of purchasing, I couldn't stop myself. A few extra Star Wars Legion units turned into buying the other core box. I then proceeded to buy unit after unit and hero after hero. By the time I decided to play a game with my son, I had built, primed and painted almost half the models that were printed. I know what I'm saying is probably frustrating a lot of people. I know, I have a problem. The worst part came after I had finished painting the Rebels and the Imperials. I set up an easy game for my son and me to play. We made it to the end of round 1 and my son said, can we be done? And I said, what do you mean? He says, I'm bored, Dad, I don't want to play anymore. And I said, well, we haven't even started shooting at each other yet. And he said, yeah, I know. I don't want to play though. And I said, would you want to try playing on another date? And he said, no. Yeah, do you know what you are, man? Alright? You are an uber nerd. Literally an uber nerd who doesn't understand why other people might not be into what you're into. Right? You know? You just want to be left alone to play and have fun with your models and your stuff. That's what you want to do. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying. It just is what it is. That's where you are. So, yeah. So some people aren't going to get it. When you find your people, though, you'll do what you did in the military and you'll be hanging out the back of a car or a van or a tank playing your games night and day because you find your people. You know what I mean? My son is probably not going to be a wargamer, but sure, that is a little disappointing for me, and I'm not going to force him to participate in hobbies that he doesn't enjoy. So, I ended up putting all my Star Wars Legion stuff away. I have not touched the other 2 factions that I was prepared to work on since that day. I idiotically made the mistake of going all in and spending tons of my time and money on Star Wars Legion before my son had even tried the game. Yeah, man, you're desperate. You're desperate to play these games. And because you've got the money and the time, I've done this. But with role-playing, right? So, I've done what you do, but I don't do it with money. I do it with my effort and time, right? So, as a DM, as somebody who dungeon masters a lot, who plays a lot of tabletop role-playing games, I'm the kind of guy who goes all in, right? I'll make... If you play a game with me, I'll make the setting, I'll make the background lore, I'll make the rules. All that shit gets written and done first, right there for you, and I can even switch the rules around if you don't like certain ones and rewrite them and things like that. And I throw in an amazing amount of time and energy into making the game good. So much so that when I get to the game, I probably don't have as much energy as I should do because I'm already tired from all of the work I've done to get to this point, right? And it kind of bites me in the ass because then people don't turn up to sessions, right? Or the people who do turn up don't turn up with wanting to play the game in a good spirit attitude, And it ruins the entire thing. The more effort you put into something, the more brittle your experience is, in my opinion. Do you know what I mean? With other people. If you put loads of effort into painting your Star Wars Legion miniatures and the other person doesn't quite get it, then you get very brittle and go, do you know what? I shouldn't do this. I'm just going to back away now. You know what I mean? You get buyer's remorse very, very, very quickly. I don't know what the cure for that is. Some of us are just obsessive, and some of us are natural game masters in life. And that's what you are. You're a dungeon master, but not for D&D. You're a dungeon master for life in general, and wargaming, and gaming. You know what I mean? You're the guy who gets the stuff. You're the guy who is supposed to build a community around him. That's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to be the nucleus around which everybody else spins. And if you're not doing that, then you're kind of sad, right? You kind of get yourself down and miserable, Anyway, after the Star Wars Legion debacle, I went back to painting A Song of Ice and Fire, but I still had nobody to play with. There were no hobby stores in the area that do miniature wargaming. I asked some of my old board game friends if they would be interested in playing a miniature war game, but they told me that they are not into that. There are a lot of individuals out there who play what's called Euro-style board games, where everyone plays together, but you can't affect what the other player is doing. These types of games are designed to not hurt other players' feelings, because there are no gotcha elements. Some friends have had prior board game nightmares in their past during their Ameritrash games, where you can mess with other players. There was even a fist fight that broke out between 2 of the nicest gamers I know during a game of Battlestar Galactica. Those 2 players had to take a break from their friendship after that event, but they decided to game together again. They agreed to only play Euros. Not to get off topic, I'm still looking for just one person out there to play with. In addition to asking friends, I went as far as to post on social media to see if there was anybody in the area willing to play. I had no takers. If you're wondering, yes, I am married, and my wife doesn't game outside of the occasional game of Uno. Fair enough. Fair enough. Enter my new brother-in-law, who you can call Jeff. Jeff was not what I would call an intellectual. We began playing board games together. Even though there were times he struggled to grasp the rules, we had a lot of fun. Jeff was awestruck with my nerd cave basement. I had a large dedicated gaming table, tons of paints, and stacks of board games. I eased Jeff into the more difficult games, and then decided to introduce him to A Song of Ice and Fire. When I showed Jeff the units and explained how the game is played on a table with no game board, he was captivated. In fact, he begged me to play. I enthusiastically told him that we would set up an evening during the week and I would teach him how to play. I was so excited to finally bust the game out that I had been feverishly painting over the last few years. Come game time, Jeff wanted to play the Free Folk, a Horde army, so I chose the Night's Watch, an elite army, to stick with the theme. I let Jeff build his own list, mistake number 1. Jeff saw a dude riding a bear, shapeshifters, giants and mammoths, and said he had to have all of the wacky shit without taking any of the core units. I tried to dissuade him from doing so and helped him build his list, but he refused. In hindsight, I have no idea why I didn't just build his list for him. Each unit came with its unit card. He had unit cards galore on the table that he struggled to keep track of. I also asked him what game size he wanted to play, small, standard or large, and he chose large. Mistake number 2, for obvious reasons. So we began playing the game, and Jeff struggled to keep track of all of his different units. He struggled to understand the political tactics board, and he struggled to understand how to play cards out of his tactics deck. The game isn't hard. The game is designed as one of those easy to learn but impossible to master type of games. I figured Jeff would pick it up because he's picked up much harder board game rules in the past. I helped Jeff through some questions and confusion, and it seemed like we were both having a great time. The game I've been dying to play for the last 4+ years was even better than I was expecting. I felt like all the work I had done in painting and all the effort and money I'd spent on this game was now going to be worth it. About halfway through our game, Jeff stops, deadpans me and says, "Tyler, can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure, man." And Jeff, with a new sense of frustration in his voice, says, "Why the fuck do you play these kind of games? Like, why don't you just play a video game? You know there's Total War Warhammer 2, right? I'd play that with you." I didn't even know how to respond. What he said pierced me and it hurt, and I didn't want to show it. I wanted to lash out and tell him something stupid about how wargaming is more mature than video gaming, but that isn't necessarily true. But video games were now the opposition to what I felt I also enjoyed, so I felt inclined to bash them. I know how you feel. That is one of the reasons why I originally didn't like Warhammer Total War, because people saying, well, they might bring Warhammer back. By the way, they haven't. The old world isn't really, let's be honest, it isn't really Warhammer, let's be honest. Do you know what I mean? Not that you can actually fucking buy it, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. Okay. I didn't. I had already felt alone in this hobby. The only people that ever showed me some amount of interest were my son and my brother-in-law. Now, both have made me feel that there is something clearly wrong with me. Is there something wrong with the hobbies I enjoy? At this point, I didn't even want to finish the game, but he decided he wanted to power through. I let him win. I drew it out to where it had a dramatic last stand victory on his behalf, but he didn't even care. I said, "So, you'd never play this again?" And he replied with, "Nah." So just like Star Wars Legion, I put the game in miniatures away and just felt defeated. I stopped painting for 2 months, and thinking about the hobby made me feel depressed. After those couple months away, I decided to pick up my brushes again and told myself, I'm going to keep painting these miniatures, and one day, when I'm all done painting, if there is still nobody to play with, I'll just fucking play with myself. Well, that's one way of solving the issue, I suppose. You could just, have a good go there. Enter my son's friends, 13-year-olds, who have given me a glimmer of hobby hope. Recently, my son had some of his friends come over to hang out. I told my son that I wanted him to do something that's not just on a screen, but my son said he didn't know what else there was to do. That's gotta be fucking infuriating when you've just told him that you do Star Wars Legion. I offered to get out my old Heroescape sets and set it all up for him and his friends. The boys let me play, and we had a 5-player free-for-all battle. In Heroescape, there are 2 ways to play. There's an easy basic stats version, where heroes and troops have no abilities. There's also the advanced version, where you have abilities, and the characters and heroes have lots of synergies. I decided to start them off on the basic side. And I noticed 2 of his friends quickly picked up the strategy and were having the absolute time of their lives. It wasn't close. Those 2 boys fought each other for victory, and while my son and his other friend were sending lambs into the slaughter. When the game was over, the 2 strategic boys, not related, told me the game was too simple and they wanted to try the advanced version next time. I started to ask if they liked painting board games and they both said yes. I asked what their favourite kind of board games were, and the first said, Axis and Allies. And the second said, the kind of board game that never ends. These guys are fucking hard ass. I said, can I show you something in my basement? Sounds creepy, I know, but they obliged. Yeah, this is like, yeah, coming to my playroom, you know. We headed into my basement, and I showed them all my games, paints, miniatures, etc. They were enthused. I bet they fucking... Dude, if somebody did this to me when I was like 13, 14, like, look at all my Space Marines on this wall, I'd be like, oh my fucking god. I told the boys about the Star Wars Legion game I had, and they might enjoy that one. One of them said that they weren't that big into Star Wars, but they would give it a try. The other was about to run through a brick wall if it meant he could play that game. They also saw some of the Song of Ice and Fire miniatures I had sitting on the table, and were like, whoa, that's cool. One of the boys pointed at one of the models I was working on and said, wait, what? There are girls in dresses in this game too? I said, oh yeah, that's Shay. She's a whole lot of fun to play with. Those of you not in the know, yeah, Shay is a prostitute in the thing. Anyway, in case you were wondering, yes, I was that close to saying the word whore. One of the boys asked what the game was based on, and I was aware that both boys love to read. I had to take a step back to ensure I could handle this correctly, and I replied, yeah, the game is based on Game of Thrones, and it's not an appropriate book to read until you're 18. Even then, it's probably not appropriate. That's not to say the game is inappropriate, but I'm just not sure how your parents would feel about you playing a game based on some pretty horrible things. And I left it at that. Dude, if you wanted to get boys into a game, you've just said all the right things. Right? If you tell a boy, it's too extreme, dude, you can't do that, they'll be like, ooh, fucking watch me. Right? After both boys went home, their mums told me that they would not shut up about how much fun they had. The mums also told me that they kept asking when they could come over to my place again and play another game. Dude, if you're ever single, and their mums are ever single, that is an in right there. If you're good at entertaining their sons, dude, that's it's game over. So here I am, stealing my son's friends from him like a total asshole. No, mate, he absolutely decked your love of the hobby, so fuck him. Sorry. Like, no, you've now got people to play with. Good. But the fact is, these are two boys, and they are both bored and do not have anywhere else to go to do the things that intellectually and creatively stimulate them. So, I have set up a date and time for the two boys to come over to play Star Wars Legion against each other. I'm glad that I can participate in the hobby and help facilitate a game, even though I won't have the opportunity to play. At least not yet. I would like to say that purchasing my addiction is over, but it's not. Speaking of, both friends of my son let me know that their favourite book is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So guess what I have done now? Guess. Yeah, you literally spent all your money on LOTR battle game, right? Middle-earth, yeah. All of it. That's right. I spent a bunch of money on the Middle-earth strategy battle game. There we go. I have boxes and boxes sitting in my basement ready to be built, primed and painted. You can blast me over this if you want to. But I'm okay with it. No regrets. At least not yet. Well, no, I'm not going to blast you for this one because you were given the, how do I put it, the go-ahead by people who actually want to play the game. Do you know what I mean? The problem with you is that you've jumped the shark so many times that you've been burned. Anyway, there is the story of why the majority of my time in the hobby has been a nightmare. To recap, I overspend and overcollect, and I have no one to play with. I am certain that my story will resonate in some way with your listeners, especially those who don't have hobby stores around them. I know this is a little bit different than a typical hobby nightmare, but I wanted to share because I have no one else who will listen. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I appreciate all the time you spend reading our stories. Even though the nightmares can be devastating, rage-inducing, or cringe, they brought me a lot of joy. The stories you read let me feel connected to the hobby while I paint, especially because I have nobody to talk to in real life about miniature wargaming. I know your channel is very focused on 40k, but a game like 40k is impossible for me to play when there is nobody else around who plays it. Maybe one day. Then again, maybe not. Again, thank you for all you do, Tyler. P.S. It makes me laugh every time you say, get in the fucking sea. I tried using it the other day, but isn't the same with an American accent. Yeah, it's the same as when an American says cunt. Doesn't work. Can't. No, it doesn't. No, shut up. Shut up. Right? Don't insult my language. You know? Anyway. Yeah, there will be a lot of people out there who are exactly the same way. Exactly the same way. I've held off on this story for a long, long time. So, Tyler, hope you are listening, man. I get that there's no fixing the situation you're in, but I think you're doing what you should do. You're enjoying your hobby on your own terms, and now you've got 2 people to play with. And remember, those people are going to grow up. They may be 13 now, but they will grow up, and they'll get to a stage where they actually want to come around and play all the time, right? And want to have fun. So don't worry too much about it. You will get there eventually. I can promise you that. All right? Cool. I love you all long time, guys. I will speak to you very, very, very soon for some more Hobby Nightmares. Have a blast. Have a wonderful weekend. And I'll see you on Monday. Have a good one. Bye now.